You're listening to Neuma, the Crossroad of Science and Enlightenment. This podcast is a place where science meets soul and healing meets hope, where the latest in science meets ancient wisdom to illuminate the path toward healing and transformation. We break through stigma and misinformation to explore the transformative power of psychedelic therapy, holistic health, and the mind-body connection. Through stories, insight, and expert conversations, we provide practical solutions to help you reclaim your mental health, embrace your spirituality, and achieve true enlightenment. Hosted by Alan Wiederhold, author of the book Walking in the Garden, Discovering God Through Psychedelics. Alan is the consummate explorer, passionate about empowering others to embrace the divinity of their true selves, as well as the founder of Neuma Health, whose mission is to restore and transform lives. Here's your host, Alan Wiederhold.
Welcome back, you beautiful people. This is Alan Wiederhold, your host, CEO, and founder of Neuma, and this is Neuma, the Crossroad of Science and Enlightenment. I have with me today Shervon Laurice, who is the owner of Restore Tranquility in Silver Spring, Maryland. So this is so cool for me because so many of my guests are all over the country. I've had some from other parts of the world, and now we're home team. We're here. We're down the road from each other. And I was thinking about this morning. I'm like, why didn't I just drive down there? That would have been amazing. So I'm so happy and excited that you're on the show. So Shervon, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So now this wasn't your first gig, correct? We talked for a while. You had a thing before this, and I always love to approach, how did the medicine find you? How did you get to where you are today?
Yes. Well, the medicine found me for sure. I was not one of those kids who experimented at all with any psychedelics, with any drugs, not even cannabis. Come from a very Pentecostal Christian background. I was raised by pastors. And so I was the oldest of three, and I did what I was told. I did not even experiment high school, college, or in my 20s in reference to any of the substances that we now see as either being legalized, decriminalized, none of it. I didn't get interested until my 30s, and by then I was already a therapist.
Wow. So you and I I've always learned, never ask a lady her age. I feel like we're close in proximity.
Yeah.
And I think what I loved about that was that you were a preacher's kid. I grew up in the Pentecostal charismatic environment myself. I talk about this a lot. In the 7th grade, someone prophesied I was going to be a youth pastor.
Wow.
Yeah. So didn't go that direction, but, yeah, I can see completely where you were. Everything that I ever learned about this as well was bad, drugs. So many of my guests have similar stories of ours. So when you became a therapist, what was the thought process for wanting to become a therapist?
It started a little bit in high school. So I was one of those kids who worked with the guidance counselor's office. And so they created a program that was targeted to have teens work with other teens as a peer counseling type situation. This is the middle of the 80s. And so I got trained as a peer counselor and would have set hours in the guidance counselor's office to be available for anyone who wanted to talk. And our community center, I grew up in Queens, New York, and down the street from our school was a community center that also decided to have a paid program for kids to work with kids. And so I became a counselor in their program, and that was my first paying job. I was a counselor.
Wow.
A peer counselor. Wow. Yeah. So in
some
both
people are working
places,
in the mall, some people are doing all these other things, and this is amazing.
Yeah, this is how I started. Yeah. So that was my sophomore, junior, and senior year of high school. Yeah. So the bug hit me early.
Back in the 80s. So back in the 80s too, we really we didn't talk about mental health. We really didn't. So I'm kind of curious.
Really.
Yeah.
No, we didn't use those words.
Yeah, I had another guest. We were talking about this, and it wasn't that we didn't talk about it. We just didn't know how to talk. We didn't know how to vocabularize what it
Right.
was we were trying to talk about when we say mental health.
Absolutely. The thing for them that they were really keen on in the beginning was teenagers get stressed out. They need to have a place to talk in other spaces that are not including their parents. And that really was the gist of it. So that's why it was a peer counseling program in both places. As the 80s moved on, though, the AIDS crisis had already started to show itself. And so one of the components of my job at the community center was to also talk about safer sex and using condoms, because condoms had become the thing that I guess they had realized could protect people. So that was my first entree into that as well.
Interesting. So this is all going on. Was there ever a point in time where you thought about doing something else, or you had said it, you caught the bug?
Nope. Caught the bug. I mean, I thought actually when I went to college that I was going to become a doctor. So
Okay.
My freshman year was all pre-med. I actually thought that I would eventually just become a medical doctor because my whole idea as a child was I wanted to help people. And so I went through freshman year and all the pre-med prerequisites and all the things. Started sophomore year, and there was a class I took. It was a sociology type class, and it shifted my thinking a little bit. And I remembered my days as a peer counselor and started to rethink my path. And in the middle of sophomore year, changed my major. And it's interesting because people would think from my religious background that I would have gone into becoming maybe a preacher or a minister or something. And I wasn't necessarily interested in that consciously, but here's what I changed my major to: religious studies.
All right.
So
you weren't interested, but you were interested.
Yes, very much. So my major became religious studies and sociology, and I finished out my studies from there and didn't again think about counseling as an immediate thing, but it was still in the back of my mind. And when I graduated, case management, social work type things until I could find the right program for me to go back and get my counseling degree. And I found it at Loyola. I became a pastoral counselor. So here it was. I did a religious degree, and then my master's is in pastoral counseling.
Beautiful. So we hit it quickly. The medicine found you in your 30s. Tell me about that.
Yeah.
So what was that like? Because I know for so many of us.
Yeah, I didn't get curious. I didn't try it until my 40s.
So you even knew about it, because I don't even think I knew about it until the very end of my 40s. So I was never very similar. I was never around it. I didn't know anybody who did it. Never really. I knew kids who had smoked cannabis, and they were the bad kids.
Yep.
And so you remember. So, and they were going to lose all their brain cells, and there was just all this stuff that was stigmatized to that. So where did you in your 30s begin to even see it? And I feel like sometimes I must have had my head in the ground somewhere, because I just never had even thought about it.
Yeah, I started hearing people have conversations about psychedelics. It was in my late 30s. I was living in DC by then. And people talking about, most of them were burners. I will say that.
Got it.
We were having these great experiences in the Burning Man community with psychedelics. So the most things I had heard about was LSD, which I was like, absolutely not. I'm not doing that ever in life. And mushrooms, which I was like, okay, that's a thing that comes out of the ground. But not right now. And by then I was working full time for the federal government doing outpatient substance abuse treatment. And so even with my curiosity, I couldn't step into that arena because we had random drug testing.
Oh, yeah.
So I just kind of allowed it to be a curiosity until I met a client some years later who was part of the policymaking team to bring cannabis to the state of Maryland for medicinal use. And my question to her was, why would a person use cannabis instead of their mental health drugs or medication that their doctor prescribed? And she started talking about the mental health benefits she had experienced with cannabis. I was like, okay, I got to thinking about it. And what little research there was, I kind of Googled and read some things that seemed like it was promising. And so it shifted my perspective in working with clients, at least by that point, because, and I think I was maybe 39, 40 years old. I had worked with clients already for a number of years, and in my mind, pathologized their cannabis use, and that conversation started the trajectory of me shifting my thinking.
It's interesting. I've heard the quote from a previous guest, stigma and science, because more often than not, we cloud our science with stigma of our collective experience.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of Alan Watts, and I talk to my 8 and 10-year-old about these kind of things all the time, because I'm trying to push not my agenda. I want them to be open to be able to understand that the experiences that we all have are shared collectives from where? Our government, our neighborhoods, our schools, our churches, our cultures. So
Yes.
they all drive the behaviors that we have, good, bad, or indifferent. They need to be questioned and explored.
Yes.
And I even love when my kids question, because I think when we were growing up, if you asked your parents something, what was the answer? Because I said so.
Because I said so. That's it.
And now I love the why, because I feel like we have to go deeper. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
So you're now having these conversations. You're more open. How did you have your first experience?
So around 2017-ish, so yeah, somewhere in there, I watched a documentary called Psychedelica on the Gaia channel, which is like the spiritual streaming channel. I love that channel.
I think that's why I love you so much, because I thought I was the only person that subscribed to that channel.
Nope. I've been a subscriber probably since 2012, and I've watched their evolution because it used to be all yoga, meditation, Buddhist teachings. And over time, they have shifted to include work like from Dr. Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden and all this metaphysics and new thoughts. And then they started stepping into psychedelics. And I was like, what is happening?
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. So Psychedelia, I have watched it. So let's go there. And before I forget, they have a new one on there called Down the Rabbit Hole.
Ooh.
It is. So I was like actually sharing some of these things with my 10-year-old, because I was on a run and I'd listen to it while I run. And that one's definitely, people who are listening, definitely worth checking out, Going Down the Rabbit Hole.
Nice. I will pull that one out myself.
All right. So we're watching Psychedelia.
Yeah. So I'm watching the series and it has all these different parts and they're doing an overview of all the different classic psychedelics and the non-classic psychedelics. Cannabis was one of them that they featured. And I watched that episode 3 times because I was surprised to learn that cannabis could be classified as a psychedelic. And so one of the gentlemen who was in that episode is Daniel McQueen. And he had started he's out in Colorado, and he'd started the Center for Medicinal Mindfulness. So I looked them up, kind of stalked them for a little while on their website. Oh, they have trainings. Great. Oh, he has a book coming out. And so I waited for the book to be released, ordered it, and decided to take the deep dive. And I was reading it, and about halfway through, I signed up for the training because I was just like, whoa. And cannabis was already legal for medicinal use here in Maryland. And still in the mindset of being a good girl, I was like, I'm not doing any of the other medicines because they're not, we're not doing that. They're illegal. So I sign up for this training. It's 2020. The world shuts down just before my training. We were due to be there April 1st, 2020. I was just like, what? To their credit, they took a few months, did a little bit of experimenting, and turned our training into an online training, which to our benefit meant, I mean, he had been already doing this for almost a decade. To our benefit meant we learned how to do this in person and online for people.
Wow. And I remember that time too, because I was part of a healthcare company. And I remember, just like you, I was actually hiring people from all over the country, and I was bringing them in for training. And then I remember, for whatever reason, I still remember like it was yesterday. Like the world was shutting down. My wife and I flew to Vegas to run a 100-miler in the deserts of Arizona. I land, we're watching it on TV, and they're talking about this thing, and we're looking at each other, and then we drive like 4.5 hours to the site where I'm going to do this 100-mile run. I've been training all year, and they're getting ready to shut it down. And I'm like, what the heck? And then they actually kept it going. So I got to run through Antelope Canyon, if you remember, like the pictures of the slot canyons. And I remember coming back and talking to the people who were supposed to come into the office. Like I was flying them all back to Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
And then there weren't any more flights. Everything was done. Like they were shutting Vegas down. I think we were like the first group of people. They were like, you know what, done. And to see the lights go down in Vegas was kind of weird.
That is weird.
So yeah, so you're moving to this so you're like one of the beginning of the online, very similar to us, because we had to kind of navigate everything that we were doing to accommodate an online program.
Yes, absolutely. My practice shut down, and I was one of those therapists who was old school. No, therapy happens in person. And they had already started to create platforms for online therapy. And I was like, nope. But something told me it was so interesting when you start to listen to your gut instincts, to check in with your inner voice on things and actually listen to it. The year before, in 2019, I had a client who was traveling a lot and didn't want to miss a lot of therapy. So I created one of these online platforms to just be able to meet with that one client.
Oh.
The world shuts down, and luckily I had already gotten acclimated to using that platform. So I brought all of my clients onto that platform.
What was their initial response? What was their feedback?
For the clients, they were happy that we were able to still be up and running and see them. And because everybody was anxious, everybody was nervous, some people depressed. And so they were very excited about this kind of online platform. To this day, some of them have not set foot back in my office. They're like, no, I'm good online.
I feel like that's what we've learned, because I was old school too. Like people had to be in the office and people had to come in for training, and you're kind of realizing... Yeah. Not really, but at the same time, I feel like we've lost some of that connection. I
think in some ways, but the clients that want to meet with me in person, I do. I come into the office at least once a week on Tuesdays, sometimes on a Thursday or Friday. It's when I offer journey experiences. And so those who want to meet in person, they come and meet me in person.
All right, so we watched. We had some cannabis. So we opened up some blinders, and then we're still not going to do any of the other things. So the classics.
I got the training in 2020, finished up the first 3 levels by 2021, and started seeing people. So by summer of 2021, we could be in space with some people. You just had to do a lot of testing and watch where you were going before you were doing something major. And so some of my clients took me up on, they were like, absolutely, I would love to do a session with you. And so a bunch of my clients took me up on it in 2021. And just the beauty of watching, how they say in the psychedelic space, a psychedelic journey is like 10 years of therapy in a short amount of hours. Man, to watch someone who has clinical depression that no medication can touch sit up from their session and smile for the first time, like you've never seen them smile. Just amazing. Just amazing. Another person who's stuck wanting to start a business and feeling like some resistance within her, come up from her session and go, I can do hard things. And she started that business, and to this day, that business is running.
I remember my first experience, and I think I said exactly the same thing. It was like 10 years of therapy in 3 hours.
Yeah. For a lot of people, that's what it feels like.
Yeah, I got to relive I got to revisit childhood abuse, and I got to sit on the bed and forgive him. I called him like 6 weeks later. We talk about this on my show all the time. And then I remember working with someone very similar. It's so crazy because he told me 17 years, same therapist, 5 different SSRIs, and some coping skills that never worked. And then he decided to do this. Then he said, I had my very first smile for Christmas. And I was like, yeah, it's like,
yes, that's the work. It is like amazing. It's so gratifying to be the facilitator and just to hold space and to help them work through whatever is coming up. And so that's where I started with psychedelic cannabis. And 2021, 2022, 2023, that's all I worked with. And then I got wind that Maryland was thinking about decriminalizing psilocybin. And I was like, oh, I got to get that training because I need to be on the forefront of that when that happens.
yeah.
So I got that training, and that, it was 2021 when a friend of mine was inviting over a bunch of female friends and wanted to have a psychedelic circle at her house. And so up until that point, I had only stepped foot in psychedelic cannabis. And so I was like, all right, I'm game. I'll come. And so she provided mushrooms. It was a combination of mushrooms and MDMA, neither of which I had stepped into before. But they had been doing this work. She was co-facilitating with someone else, and they had been doing this work for a long time in indigenous spaces. So I took the minimal amount of MDMA because I was like, I don't know anything about that. But I took the regular amount of the mushrooms and had just the most beautiful night. We started it, just after dinner. And it was just the visuals, the audible downloads, the feeling of love that came over me. I was just like, oh, yeah. This is medicine I could work with, for sure. And so when I got wind that Maryland was contemplating, I went ahead and got the training for psilocybin. And so now I offer cannabis as a psychedelic for journey work, as well as psilocybin for journey work.
So psilocybin, if I were someone who was contemplating this, and I love this conversation, what should I be asking? There's so much stuff media right now, good, bad, indifferent. I watched the ketamine documentary with Matthew Perry that aired last Tuesday on Peacock. Saw that Oprah and Michael Pollan just did this thing a couple days ago, and the media is all a frenzy. Yeah, it's so crazy. Like, it's a good time to be alive, but at the same time, it's like, what? Like, but if I were looking, what should I be asking? Like, because I know for me, very similar to you, when I knew that I had kind of reached the bottom point of my life, I had hit the rock. Like, well, I thought I did, and I still said no. Like, I still said that there was just no way that I was going to do this. There was drugs, it was all this stuff, and I fortunately had a mentor, a mastermind coach, who sat me down and said, "Your soul is dying for." Like, and I still said no. And then my family doctor, who had gone and had this incredible experience, had said to my wife and I, he's like, "Bro, I don't get it. Like, I give you stuff from a lab that I have no idea where it comes from.
Right.
And you don't even question it. Like, you open up the pill bottle and take an antibiotic without even thinking, and you've got a problem with something that came from God, like that came from the ground." So what do you say to those people who are contemplating, who are dying or searching for something and they're not able to find relief? Thanks for listening to this episode of Neuma, the Crossroad of Science and Enlightenment. We hope you're enjoying the deep dive into psychedelics, neuroplasticity, and the path to transformation. Before we continue, let's discuss recovery. After powerful experiences, your mind deserves more than just rest. It needs real support. That's where Neuma Hydrate comes in. Formulated with GABA, taurine, inositol, magnesium, and more, Neuma Hydrate is designed to help your brain recover faster and support neuroplasticity, giving you the clarity and the energy to fully embrace your journey. Fuel your recovery and elevate your mind with Neuma Hydrate. Check out neuma.health to learn more. Now, enjoy the rest of the episode.
If they're contemplating a psychedelic journey, or even microdosing psychedelics, I start the conversation with why. What's coming up for you? What do you notice in your life? What are you feeling in your life that's even got you thinking about it? And are you coming from a space of mental health and mental wellness? Or are you looking for more spiritual growth, spiritual enlightenment? Or is it simply curiosity? What in your life do you want to fix?
Ooh.
Shift, change.
Do you see an intersection between those 3 points?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I have this conversation a lot. I feel like there's the clinical model.
Yeah.
There's the clinical ceremonial model, and then there's the completely spiritual model. And then somehow we have just forgotten about the fun. Like, there are times I just want to take someone walk in nature and just and just be reminded of like how amazing things are.
Exactly. But there is connection. Our society is very much so about compartmentalizing when it comes to medical health, mental health, and spirituality. But that is not the way things were originally. So pre-Newton, all of the scientists, philosophers, and spiritual leaders were all intertwined having conversations, all of them. And when the church but mental health is spiritual health. I believe it all day.
Well, and it's an interesting, like I said before, so I watched the Oprah podcast with Michael Pollan, and there's 2 sides of every coin. And I love the conversation and the debate because it's a conversation. So when psychedelics goes to Oprah, it's like mainstream. But then there are people who are like, well, she said some pretty harsh things about it back in the day. And I think a lot of people did, but I think she is calling it like she's seeing it, and she's now asking questions like we all have or are. And I think that's so beautiful. Yeah. And to be able to have the courage to be able to do that.
Yes.
And kind of in real time that's a pretty cool platform. But I think what Michael Pollan said yesterday, which I think you'll appreciate, and I would love maybe some of your insight. So he talked about these symptoms, depression, anxiety, all of these different things are manifestations of the same thing, just externally represented in another way. And they all really come from what we would call ego. It's our Alan Watts used to say, we are the hero of our own experiences, which crippleize us.
Yes.
And we're not able to move forward. So most of the symptoms that we have are all from the same space. We get stuck in a loop, can't get out.
Yes, I would agree with that assessment, and I would take it even further because we think of, when people hear the word ego, or originally we think of our personality, right? But we're not using ego in that way, right? It's that part of our brain that we need in order to live a 3D life, 3D reality, but it also protects us, right? It protects us from what it thinks is going to be dangerous. And going deeper, our ego is separation. So when we think about the story of Adam and Eve, they're in the garden and they are in sync with each other and in sync with the Creator. There's this point when they are no longer in sync with each other or the Creator. So we have all the stories, right, of the Judeo-Christian model of what happened and who did what in the garden. Why did we get kicked out of the garden?
It's your fault. It's just It's totally your fault. I tell my wife this all the time. If you just would have not eaten the apple, I would not be in this I would not be here. Like, life would be good.
Right? Years ago, I heard a different take on that story. which totally made sense to me because it was from the metaphysical space. Adam and Eve in sync with each other and the creator. There is a decision that is made at some point in their existence to experience what would it be like to have choice? What would it be like to be able to have free will? And in the thinking and accepting of that model came separation, because in order to have free will, the creator allows us to not perceive him or her, right?
Yeah.
There's only love. When we describe evil or sin, which sin is a whole thing that I have a soapbox.
Well, we're going to get there in a second, but all right.
But when we talk about that, it's literally just separation. Our perception that we are separate from God. That's all it is. All of the mental health stuff trickles down from there. Because in order to believe that we are separate from God, we had to develop an ego in order for us to stay alive. And in that theory, in the metaphysical space, what I loved so much, this will shake up my whole Pentecostal upbringing if I was to talk about this with my family. Ego is the devil. There is no devil entity. Ego is the devil.
Yeah, because the actual literal translation is the Satan. It's not a who, it's a what.
Yep.
So, and I 100% agree. So I went to Bible college. So,
there you go.
Which is very frustrating for, my Pentecostal friends and family. Because there really isn't a word hell like what we think.
No.
So
many years later.
Yeah, and it's actually used, it's used 3 different places. It is not it's Sheol. So it's the trash dump that Jesus talked about in Matthew.
Yep.
And then Tarsus. So, but the whole idea, and I 100% agree, is that it's separation from peace.
Yeah.
Ultimately, there's a shalom, and anything that is not is a separation.
Separation. Yeah. You're not perceiving God in that moment.
Yeah. I was talking to some guys. I'm in my very first Bible study. And bring these ideas to a Bible study.
Right. Well, luckily the spiritual community I am in is a metaphysical one. So we have these conversations all the time.
Oh, yeah, and I love these conversations. And so I say the exact same thing. I'm like, you guys just realize that sin is a separation from peace, and it's from God. That's all separation. That's all it is.
The true definition
is the mark. It's an archery term. Exactly. So I talked to these guys about this, and they're like, never really thought about it like that. And they're like, and if I think about it, I think about this gigantic city with buildings, and this building is higher sin, and this building is lower sin, and I'm like, there is no right or wrong. There only is.
Mm-hmm. That's it. That's it.
And they're like, blow my mind, rock my world. And I'm like, well, but if you're able to if you're able to grasp that concept, then you're able to kind of maybe go a little bit further and ask the question, am I a noun or am I a verb?
Right.
Because if you're a noun, I think that's where we get that's a loop.
Yes. One of my favorite meditations and most infuriating meditation practices came from a naturopath who I met 20 years ago. He holds meditations, at least before the pandemic, every Sunday in his home/workspace. And literally the meditation is, who am I? That's all you think about.
I love that.
People always start with nouns. We start with nouns.
Yeah, and that's why I love that with Alan Watts, because I always ask that, are you a noun? Yeah. We're all verbing. We're verbing.
We're verbing. Right. Once you really get underneath that meditation, you get to the verb.
Now, when you're able to grasp that concept, how does life change? Because you see this all the time with your clients. Like, so at what point do they say, okay, I'm open to having the conversation around psychedelics? And then I now have to ask myself, because there are intentions you kind of mentioned, like, so what are the intentions behind that? Like, how do I begin to have that conversation?
Yeah, so I let people come to it themselves. I really think that stepping into medicine work has to be something that calls you, that you feel like, yeah, I'm going to do this. All my clients know I offer it. I've told them all. I have a newsletter, so they see it. And so some have, when they are ready, they'll mention it, and then we begin that work. I was working with a client who was microdosing, but she realized the microdosing wasn't enough and then decided to do a macro journey.
Wow. Okay. Do you think there's I don't know why I always use right and wrong. I think because that's what society tells us we have to put labels on things.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a proper way to do this? Because I've had some people who have said, microdosing is all I need. I don't think I need a macro dose. I don't know if I would have. So my very first experience was actually MDMA and ketamine. And I've tried almost every entheogen and pathogen out there right now. But for me, I think I needed that macro. I needed to be able to go into the room and to revisit trauma in order to heal. I needed that 3-hour sesh to be able to do that. So is there a proper way? How do we know?
I think the proper way is whatever way it calls you. So for some people, it is stepping into microdosing and then realizing they want to do a macro journey. And for others, they want to get the big hit. And then they find out about microdosing. So I found out about microdosing after I had already been in this space. And I was like, oh, so you could kind of bring some of that energy into your own. Okay.
I didn't know that either.
And so after my first psilocybin journey at the end of 2021, I started to investigate microdosing. And I credit microdosing for the shift in my practice, because up until 2021, I'd been a solo practice. I've been a therapist for over 21 years now. And for the first 10 years, I was very part-time, had a full-time government job until they got on my nerves one good time too many. And I was like, okay, I'm out. Peace. I can go do this thing over here I've been trained to do full-time. And so in 2013, I went full-time in my private practice. But still then, I was just focused, just me, seeing clients. That was it. This work in psychedelic space opens you up to expansion. This work opens your heart up to connecting to people more. It helps you to understand yourself in a much bigger framework. And so I did this macro journey in psilocybin at the end of the year, started microdosing, and then all the questions that people had asked me years before, hey, are you going to expand into a group practice? And I'd be like, no, why would I want that headache? And all of a sudden started to make sense. Like, this is why you would want to do this, because you're just one person. You can't see everyone, right?
Yeah.
Then I slowly started to shift my practice and bring on a therapist who I work with now. And she got trained at the same school that I got trained in. So we both are able to offer psychedelic therapy in our practice. And hopefully we'll be bringing on another person this year. And that's going to be a requirement. You've got to be open to this kind of work in our practice. I tell you, when things are right, you know they are. I have been contacted since 2021 by several young people who were just starting their counseling degrees, their graduate work. They already know they want to do psychedelic work. And so they found me online and they're like, oh my God. And so they did a whole informational interview and we talked. So they're in school with the hopes that when it's time to start interning, they'll check out us to intern here.
It's so beautiful how I read in a book, you want love, give love.
Have to.
If you want success, give it away.
Yeah.
You want recognition, give recognition. And I think, and I agree with you. It's so interesting because we're taught to just go in a line and do and be and punch the ticket and do all the stuff, which robs us of so much creativity and energy and love. And I as you're talking, I'm thinking of I was still working, took some vacation time. I wrote a book called Walking in the Garden, Discovering God Through Psychedelics, about my journey. And I spoke at PsyCon Denver last year. And I remember having a mega church pastor. We Googled Christianity and psychedelics, saw my name, God called them to fly from where they were to come hear me speak.
Nice.
And I watched as she came in, sat down in the second row. I didn't know who she was. I just felt like this presence of God bringing her in there. And then we had this conversation after, and she's like, I don't know why I feel weird walking by the mushroom booth, but I do. And I'm like, but the fact that you're here and you're open to having the conversation and investigating why, which is why I think it's so cool that we're seeing these young people who are they're now reaching out and just being where we are in Maryland, where this was at one point with Shady Grove and with all of the research that was done at Hopkins.
Right here.
It's so
ground zero. And
we're ground zero. Yeah, I was going to say we're ground zero. Yeah. So, but to be able to see this renaissance of this, of the work being done at Sunstone and Hopkins is resurging. And although we were lost rolling, it's it's kind of moving forward. And it's so amazing to see that people are now being open to wanting to do work full time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This work calls me. I have been a therapist most of my life, and I love offering psychotherapy. But psychedelic therapy, I don't know if you've ever read the book called The Big Leap.
I haven't.
Okay, so it's a business book. I forget his first name, but his last name is Gay, and he was a psychologist. And in The Big Leap, he talks about your zone of genius. And we all have the ways we work. We all can learn a task and do it relatively well. May not like it, whatever. Then you have something that you're good at, but maybe it doesn't light your fire.
Okay.
So for me, I'm good at being a therapist. I've done it for most of my life, and I enjoy it very much. But what lights my fire is to facilitate psychedelic journeys. And I have figured that out over the last 5 years. It's 4 or 5 years. It's this brings me to zone of genius,
Wow. So that makes sense. So I read a book called The 9-Figure Mindset by Brandon Dawson, and he's same thing. So most entrepreneurs, most people can tell you what they don't want. And I think Mark Twain said it best. So I can help anyone get what they want. The problem is no one can tell me what they want. But what he actually did, he created an exercise in his book, and I wrote it down, and I went through and did very similar work. So what do you love? What ignites your passions and your fires, and then what don't you love? And then you find somebody to do those things for you.
Yes.
Because there's people who love those things. And if it's not running a business day to day, or it's not doing the grind stuff, find somebody who loves that stuff, because it's all complementary. We're all part of it.
That's right. That's right. So, so I get up and I'm I get to do that. I get to do that. And it's very exciting. I put together a program, microdosing program, because I realized my experience with microdosing starting in 2021 and how it expanded my mind in reference to business and moving business forward. I was oh. And I started working with some of my clients who were microdosing and watched how their mind shifted and what they were capable of in the world, whether they're in tech or in science or running a business. And I have some creatives who are also microdosing. And so I was let me put this all together. And so I created a microdosing program that includes the mental health side, the mental wellness, the somatic side, because I'm also a yoga therapist. And so I incorporate a lot of the somatic yoga techniques, because meditation, mindfulness practices like journaling, breath practices have all been now proven with research to help us in our mental state, right? And so I take those two things and put that together with psychedelic microdosing. So whether someone wants to microdose LSD or psilocybin, that's the work.
So that all sounds like a lot of work. I hear this sometimes. I hear people oh man, I got to get up in the morning and I got to spend 45 minutes doing all this. It doesn't have to be though, does it?
No, it does not. If you can set aside 30 minutes for yourself in the morning to get up, maybe you're a coffee drinker, maybe you're not, but you get up, and you sit down with your journal and you start your day with gratitude. And so write the gratitude down because it helps you to remember and feel into the gratitude. It can't just be a mental exercise. It has to be the feeling of what are you grateful for in that moment. And take, 1, 2, or 3 things, write them down. And then write down your intention for the day. It could be 1 or 2 things that you intend for the day. And one of the things I've become very keenly aware of with this word intention, we speak our intentions into the void, into existence. When we speak, we are spell casting, right? We're using words and we're casting spells into our day. This is why I tell people, be careful about the words you use because it creates your life. So set your intentions by writing them down and speaking them into the space. That's at least the minimal practice that I would give clients, especially if they're microdosing, because just like you set an intention for a big journey, you set an intention for a microdose. Every time.
That's that's great
those
advice.
Things go together. Yeah. Those things go together.
Going back to like how the brain works too, from a purely neuroscience perspective, your mind doesn't know whether it happened or not.
That's right.
So you can say, this is what we're going to do, and your brain has already thought that it's happened.
That's right.
So the spell casting is like, actually, and I hear the manifesting thing, and I remember a long time ago, I was like, what is that? It's actually real because your brain doesn't know. So yeah, so it's crazy. I had a guest. We talked about this. The gratitude in the morning is so key. Like just like pick 1, 2, or 3 things, and then do you find it helpful at the end of the day? One of my guests, he was an actor. He actually does psilocybin work with Alzheimer's patients, and it's been incredibly helpful. But he was talking about, I'll show my age again, it was Super Mario Brothers or Mario. Like at the end of every Mario stage, he jumps off the big pyramid, he lands on the pole, and then there's all the coins. Ding, 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 ding. So he says at the end of the day, he picks 5 coins, 5 things that happened during the day, could be little, could be big, didn't matter, that he would write down, and then he would actually create them as part of his journal. And then if he got stuck, he remembered the gold coins. And then every day he started with the gold coin. Here's my intentions in the morning. Here's my gold coins at night. And I was like, wow, that's a
perfect way to end the day. I just call them wins. It's like, if you think about your day, what are your wins?
Yeah,
that's perfect.
I thought that was like extremely helpful. So from a microdosing perspective, is your program online? Is it?
It is. Part of it is online. I will work with people kind of like this with a video. So I'm able to work with anyone around the country, which is phenomenal. And they procure like whatever their microdose products are. So if they're not in this area, I have 2 sources I could always refer them to. But in our area, we also have a mushroom shop in DC, which is amazing.
Yeah. I just call and I drive to Silver Spring and yeah.
There you go. So I love it. And so then we meet once a week, and it's like after we do the initial session, it's about an hour. We'll meet once a week for a half hour for 16 weeks. And whatever a person's goals are, that's where we start. And then I help them to tap into their mental wellness and what they need, to tap into that somatic mindfulness practice that they need to get them over the hump, and help them to, especially if they're new to microdosing, figure out their cadence with microdosing, right? Because we all know the Fadiman method, but it doesn't always work exactly that way for everyone. So I help them kind of tweak it according to what it is that they need, and then help them to create the life that they really want. Some of that is getting their butts moving. Like my depressed clients, it is the hardest thing to get them moving. But when they move, they feel better, right? Exercise is mental wellness, mental health maintenance. Moving our bodies is so key to our mental health. you know?
And it doesn't like when I think exercise too, I'm like, oh, I have to go to a gym. It doesn't have to be. It could be like walk or dancing or like just like get moving.
Just get the blood moving, right? It's like, what are we eating? So many foods. And I have experimented with this for years before I even stepped into psychedelic space. What we're eating affects our mood. It affects our mental health. And so it's like, what are you eating? What are you taking in every day that maybe is lowering your mood, right?
I noticed that too with like just hydration supplements.
Yeah.
So most of those, because I know that when I was having my own experiences, the exhaustion and the brain fog and the stuff like that, and then I went back and I looked at all of the other hydration things, and nothing really broke the blood-brain barrier. Like they're all great cellular stuff. So I created one. It's been awesome, but you're right. I mean, it makes such a huge difference to start looking at really what you're putting into your body, because that has a gigantic output of either gut biome or hydration. We think sometimes it's just water. It can't be. So you're right. I mean, there's a lot of things that all kind of go into this to live back in communion and perfect harmony with the garden that really we were designed to create.
Yep. Well said.
Shervon, I am going to post all of your links. I follow you already on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. I'm going to post all of your links. If there's anything else you want listeners to know.
No, I mean, we are open for business, and if people are interested in exploring in this psychedelic space, whether they feel like they have a mental health issue or not, I mean, this work will expand your life. It will shift and change your life. And so, I love, like I was talking to a woman from New York the other day. She's going to come up to Maryland to do a journey experience with me, which I love because we have the Hilton across the street from me, from my office. So people will go across the street, get a room, do a journey, and then go on back. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
So I have a couple of friends in Jersey that have been thinking about this. So yeah, that's actually a good idea. So
that's a good way to do it. Yeah.
We'll connect. I'll connect them to you. So that's awesome.
This is the work. This is the time. The country needs it. The world needs it. People are waking up, and this is the time.
Thank you so much for your time today. I know you're getting ready I'm looking at the clock and you're getting ready to see a client, and I knew we had a hard stop. But thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for leading this movement. I cannot tell you on behalf of people who have woken up. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. This is Alan Wiederhold, and this is Neuma. Don't forget, like us on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, and if this is someone that you know that might have an interest, reach out. Comments here, and I will connect it back to Shervon, and have a great day. And this is Alan Wiederhold, and this is Neuma.